1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Episode 56. February 27, 2025. Trump resembles Kickl before Kickl failed forming a coalition in Austria. In episode 56, 1 Canada election in Ontario is today. 2 United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer visits Trump in Washington, D.C. to discuss Ukraine security. 3 Austria coalition government will feature the first 3-part coalition in Austrian history. By Monday, main content. 1 Canada incumbent Conservative Doug Ford runs for another term on the issue of opposing Trump tariffs. The largest province in Canada heads to the polls. Here is what to know. Voters in Ontario will decide on Thursday, February 27, 2025 whether to re-elect Doug Ford, a Conservative who is among the harshest critics in Canada of Trump as the province of Ontario. Premier. RAWSEP View. Ironically, during the Ford first campaign for Premier, comparisons were drawn between Ford and Trump. RAWSEP Excerpt about the Ford candidacy and his position on tariffs. Ford has projected strength, regularly appearing at news conferences wearing a baseball cap that says Canada is not for sale and threatening to retaliate against the United States by cutting off the energy it purchases from Ontario. While the Conservatives already hold a majority of seats in the provincial legislature, Ford called an early election more than a year before its scheduled date in June 2026 because he said the party needed a strong mandate from voters to fight the Trump tariffs. The tariffs could cost Ontario as many as 500,000 jobs, Ford said, particularly in the Ontario province auto industry where production is so intertwined with the United States that car parts cross the border multiple times a day. During Assembly. RAWSEP Excerpt about the other candidates for Ontario Premier. A Liberal Party woman emphasizing Heath Care and a Progressive Party woman emphasizing education, but the opponents to Ford have questioned the Ford timing, noting that if tariffs were imposed, the 2 women candidate would support additional spending to help Ontarians cope with economic pains caused by the levies, rendering an early election unnecessary. The 2 women candidates have also pointed out that the federal government would be the main negotiating party with Trump, not Ontario, though Ford could take some retaliatory measures on his own. The political opponents of Ford, named Bonnie Crombie of the Liberal Party and Marit Stiles of the Progressive New Democratic Party, have been unable to gain ground. Ms Crombie, a former mayor of Mississauga, a city west of Toronto, has focused on healthcare. She has called for adding 3,100 physicians in Ontario over the next 4 years to ensure all Ontarians have a family doctor, increasing nursing salaries and financing hospital expansions. Ms Stiles, who spent 4 years as a Toronto School Board trustee, has emphasized improving education, promising to spend millions to address the province of Ontario backlog of school repairs and to eliminate interest on college student loans. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times. February 27, 2025. International relations seldom figure into local politics in Canada, and the provincial election in Ontario, where many voters are worried about issues closer to home like access to health care and the soaring cost of housing, should have been no exception. But Trump has upended the electoral dynamic. His threats against Canada, including to impose crushing tariffs on Canadian exports and to annex the country, have been cast as a defining election issue in Ontario, the most populous province in Canada, as voters head to the polls on Thursday. This election is about who we are and what we stand for, the Conservative leader Premier Doug Ford of Ontario said in a campaign ad. So let me be clear, Canada will never be the 51st state. Canada is not for sale. The province of 16 million, which represents about 40% of the population of Canada, is home to some of the key industries of Canada, including automotive manufacturing and technology. Tariffs would deal the province a deeply painful blow, including significant job losses. Since Ford called the election a month ago, he has taken a handful of days from the campaign trail to travel to Washington and make the case why tariffs would be ill-advised. Several polls show Ford holding a double-digit lead over his closest rivals, with voters regarding him as the best candidate to take on Trump. The candidates have all promised to improve health care access in a province where 25 million people do Not have a family doctor because of a severe shortfall of physicians according to the Ontario College of Family Physicians. A non-profit polls open at 9 a.m. and close at 9 p.m. to the United Kingdom, and the United States. Trump in public says yes and no repeatedly in characteristic Trump fashion when asked by Starmer to provide Ukraine with guarantees of security upon signing a minerals agreement in a meeting between UK Prime Minister Kier Starmer and Trump in Washington, D.C. Trump says he believes Putin would abide by any Ukraine peace deal. RAWSEP View of what Kier Starmer intentions were for his meeting with Trump. Starmer had come to the capital with a promise and a plea. He planned to tell Trump that his country is willing to send troops to Ukraine as part of a peacekeeping effort. Once the war ends, Starmer thanked Trump for changing the conversation on Ukraine and said he believed a historic deal could be achieved to end the fighting. The Prime Minister also gave Trump a letter from King Charles III inviting him to a state dinner. After opening it, Trump called the king a great gentleman, but underneath the diplomatic pleasantries, the two men were expected to have some difficult conversations about the future of Ukraine and whether a peace agreement results in concessions to Russia despite its invasion of its neighbor 3 years ago. Starmer was prepared to urge Trump not to rush into a diplomatic resolution to the conflict without ensuring that Ukraine is given security guarantees that would prevent Russia from invading again in the future. RAWSEP View of what Trump stated in his meeting with Starmer. Trump said repeatedly that he trusted Putin of Russia not to violate the terms of whatever peace deal that might soon be reached to end the war in Ukraine. The Trump attitude toward the Russian leader could hardly be more different from the British leader sitting inches away in the Oval Office. But in the Oval Office on Thursday afternoon, Trump was asked about this hypothetical scenario. What if Britain sent those peacekeeping troops to Ukraine only for Russia to renege on a peace deal going on the attack again? Would the Americans come to the aid of the British in Ukraine? In the span of 1 minute, Trump seemed to say no. Trump said they can take care of themselves very well. And then yes, Trump said if they need help. Trump said I will always be with the British before landing back on no. Trump said they do not need help. Could you take on Russia by yourselves? Trump asked Starmer, and uneasy laughter broke out in the room. RAWSEP View of lack of security guarantees from Trump for Ukraine. Trump has said the United States needs do not include security guarantees for Ukraine. The Trump idea of the economic partnership with the Ukrainians does not include any specific guarantee of funding for future war fighting. The Trump-Zelensky minerals agreement as of the morning of February 27, 2025 would not commit any American personnel to the region. That difference was expected to be at the center of the private deliberations between Starmer and Trump. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 27, 2025. While sitting beside Prime Minister Kier Starmer of the United Kingdom in the Oval Office on Thursday, Starmer is the latest in a series of European leaders to come to Washington hoping to reason with Trump as he pushes for negotiations with the Russians to end the war they started in Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, visited earlier in the week. 3 Austria. Christian Stalker of the mainstream People's Party will be the new premier of Austria by Monday. Neo-Nazi party fails to form a government, so 3 Austrian parties reach a deal to form government without the neo-Nazi far right. The announcement was a victory for mainstream political parties after earlier talks involving the hard right neo-Nazi Freedom Party broke down RAWSEP View of the neo-Nazi party that won the most votes in election but could not form a government. This was not exactly a firewall against neo-Nazis in Austria, but it had a similar effect to a firewall. It was an unforced error by the neo-Nazi leader Herbert Kickl of the Austrian Freedom Party when the 3 mainstream parties attempting a coalition reached an impasse. The most conservative of the mainstream parties, the People's Party, entered negotiations with the neo-Nazi Freedom Party. The conservative mainstream People's Party was prepared to make Kickl the chancellor, but those negotiations surprisingly broke down over the question of which party, People's or neo-Nazi Freedom, would run the Interior Ministry. Neo-Nazi leader Kickl did not persuade any Austrian mainstream parties after 5 months to join with him in a coalition government after he won the most votes in the election in the fall of 2024. Austria has no firewall like the firewall in Germany. The Freedom Party has repeatedly been included as a junior partner in coalition governments, most recently with the People's Party, but the Freedom Party has never held the chancellorship that gave the mainstream groups one more chance. RAWSEP View of the center-right People's Party OVP, that second place finisher that will probably successfully form the first 3-party coalition government in Austria. The government could be sworn in on Monday, March 3, 2025. Christian Stalker, who is expected to lead the country starting Monday, took over his People Party leadership after the former Chancellor Karl Nehammer and member of the People's Party resigned from the post in January when the mainstream coalition talks fell apart the first time in January 2025. Christian Stalker was widely criticized for entering into negotiations with the hard-right neo-Nazi Freedom Party, especially because he had spent months warning Austrians how dangerous the party was. The likely new chancellor Christian Stalker will lead a 3-party coalition as a member of the center-right party that has led Austria for most of the last 7 years, the People's Party, which finished second in the September elections as voters punished it for a string of corruption scandals that mostly occurred years ago. Stalker is set to lead the first 3-party coalition in an Austrian government alongside the Austrian Social Democrats and the centrist NUS party in Vienna on Thursday, February 27, 2025. The 3-party leaders presented a 200-page plan to govern the country for the next 4 years until 2028 or 2029. The coalition will announce further ministerial appointments on Friday. The announcement freezes out the Freedom Party, which failed in its own attempt to form a government in January 2025. The new government will start on thin ice. RAWSEP View that it was a bitter setback for the neo-Nazi Freedom Party, which was briefly on the cusp of giving Austria its first far-right neo-Nazi chancellor in the World War II post-war era. The Freedom Party has only grown more popular since last fall and is now backed by a third of the country. Polls show Austrians remain frustrated about an economy that has spent the last 2 years in recession. The Freedom Party, founded by former Nazi soldiers in the 1950s, and its leader Herbert Kickl, had been bidding to become the latest neo-Nazi to take or share power in Europe. RAWSEP View of the Social Democrat Party SPO, the second member of the mainstream coalition. While fixing the budget was a top priority, the Social Democrats lauded a rent freeze for people who are feeling the effects of recession. RAWSEP View of the centrist New Austria and Liberal Forum NUS Party, the third and smallest member of the mainstream coalition. One thing could make the coalition more stable. The smallest party, NUS, cannot bring down the government by leaving it because the 2 biggest mainstream parties alone have enough seats in the Austrian parliament for a majority. The NUS Party praised a plan to reduce bureaucracy and cut certain labor costs. NUS Party members are expected to approve the coalition agreement in a special vote on Sunday, March 2, 2025. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 27, 2025. 3 mainstream political parties in Austria said on Thursday that they had reached an agreement to form a a new government that excludes the far-right, ending 5 months of roller coaster negotiations after an election last fall. It was a comeback for a diverse political coalition that was tripped up by infighting when it tried and failed to form a government in January 2025 after the Freedom Party won the fall 2024 election. Mainstream parties refused to work with it. Those three mainstream parties' efforts to form a coalition bogged down on how to mix spending cuts and tax increases to reduce the Austrian budget deficit. Stalker said that the three parties were able to pick up negotiations where they broke off. In January 2025, mainstream European political parties have struggled recently with erosion in support for establishment parties and the rise of a new group of hard-right neo-Nazi leaders who have harnessed voter unrest over economic stagnation. 1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.